Across the world, there are cold cases just as chilling where killers have walked free for decades. This is 7 most disturbing unsolved cold cases you've never heard of. Case 1. West Mesa, Bone Collector. Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA, 2001 to 2005. February 2, 2009 was the day that exploded a murder mystery, one that had remained hidden for years. It involved the bodies of 11 women whose disappearances spanned from 2001 to 2005 in the desert region of Albuquerque, New Mexico. But how did it all start? It began when a young woman, Christine Ross, took her dog, Ruka, for a walk across the scrubby desert on Albuquerque's West Mesa. As the dog sniffed around, it unearthed something buried beneath the dry soil. What seemed like a casual walk turned into a chilling discovery. Christine noticed a bone, long, pale, and unlike any animal's. Concerned, she snapped a picture on her phone and sent it to her sister, who worked as a nurse. The reply came fast. "Call the police right now." Officers arrived, roped off the area, and confirmed her fear. Human remains. The desert floor was hiding more than one. In the days that followed, investigators brought in heavy equipment, forensic anthropologists, and tents to shield the site from wind and prying eyes. As they dug deeper, the scope widened. One skeleton became several. Shallow graves revealed bones stacked year by year until the tally reached 11 women, and the unborn child one of them carried. This was no accident, no scattered burial ground. It was a hidden cemetery. Each body placed within the same stretch of mesa, covered just enough to stay concealed. The city that prided itself on wide skies and desert sunsets now had a new name for its killer: the West Mesa Bone Collector. The remains belonged mostly to young women who had gone missing between 2001 and 2005. They had been loved daughters, mothers, sisters, and friends, even if their lives unfolded on society's margins. Here are their names: Jamie Barella, 15; Monica Candelaria, 22; Victoria Chavez, 26; Virginia Cloven, 24; Silania Edwards, 15; Doreen Marquez, 24; Julie Nieto, 24; Veronica Romero, 28; Evelyn Salazar, 27; Cinnamon Elks, 32; and Michelle Valdez, 22, who was pregnant when she was killed. One more set of partial remains was too incomplete to identify, suggesting a possible 12th victim, and Michelle's unborn child meant the grave count carried even more weight. Most of these women had ties to Albuquerque's East Central Avenue corridor, known as the War Zone, an area marked by drugs, poverty, and sex work. Their struggles made them vulnerable, but it did not make them disposable. Families spoke of laughter, resilience, and love that never made the headlines. Michelle Valdez's family mourned 2 lives lost in one. Jamie Barella, only 15, was never even reported missing, her absence connected only when her bones were uncovered beside her cousin Evelyn. For years, parents and siblings had begged for help when their daughters vanished. Many said they were brushed aside, told their loved ones were runaways or addicts. One mother put it simply: it was like they didn't care because she was on drugs. That hurt never faded. The crime scene grew into the largest murder investigation in New Mexico history. The Albuquerque Police Department, APD, formed a dedicated task force. The FBI joined in, along with state police, forensic anthropologists, and cadaver dogs. Investigators sifted through more than 1,200 pieces of evidence and conducted over 900 interviews. Satellite images were pulled from as far back as 2003, showing disturbed patches of soil that had sat untouched for years, narrowing the burial window to 2001 to 2005. Forensic scientists used dental records, mitochondrial DNA, and bone isotope testing to make identifications. But the desert had stripped almost everything else away. No clothing fibers that could be tied to a suspect, no fingerprints, and no usable DNA pointing to a killer. Detectives shifted focus to suspects. Lorenzo Montoya, who lived less than 3 miles from the burial site, quickly drew attention. His record was full of violence against women involved in sex work. In 1999, he tried to choke one. In 2006, he lured a young woman to his home, tied her up, and was killed during a violent confrontation when her boyfriend intervened. After his death, the West Mesa disappearances appeared to stop. Many investigators believe he was the killer, but no DNA or physical evidence ever tied Montoya to the bones. In December 2010, Albuquerque police released 6 photos of 7 other unidentified women who may also be linked to the West Mesa cases. Some of the women appeared unconscious, and many shared the same physical characteristics as the original 11 victims. The next day, the police released an additional photograph of another woman. This woman was later identified by family members, who reported that she had died of natural causes several years earlier. In June 2018, more bones were found near the site of the burials, but they were later determined to be ancient and not related to the West Mesa murders. Joseph Blee was another focus. Known in local reports as the mid-school attacker for a series of assaults in the 1980s, Blee's home revealed women's lingerie and, most tellingly, nursery tree tags from his landscaping business. At the crime scene, a tree tag of the same type had been found near one grave. That coincidence was too sharp to ignore, yet once again, there was no direct link. Blee was eventually imprisoned on unrelated charges, but he was never indicted for West Mesa. In August 2010, police searched several properties in Joplin, Missouri, associated with local photographer and businessman Ron Irwin, in connection with the West Mesa cases. They confiscated tens of thousands of photos from him, as he had reportedly visited the State Fair in Albuquerque. However, after further investigation, Irwin was cleared as a suspect. In December 2010, convicted Colorado serial killer Scott Lee Kimball claimed that he was being investigated for the West Mesa murders, but he denied killing the women. Despite his claims, no evidence was found to link him to the case. In 2014, Joseph Blee was considered a suspect for the murders. Blee, known for his 1980s assaults, had a criminal record that raised concerns. Investigators found women's underwear and jewelry not belonging to his wife or daughter in his home. Additionally, he had a tree tag from a nursery found in the West Mesa burial site. Yet, despite these connections, there was no direct proof to charge him with the murders. Blee was eventually sentenced to 36 years in 2015 for unrelated charges, but never for the West Mesa murders. Other theories surfaced: a cartel dumping ground, multiple killers using the same desert patch, even trafficking rings tied to the state fair. The truth is that every path ended the same way, not enough evidence to cross into an arrest. By 2010, momentum slowed. Detectives rotated to new assignments. Families kept holding vigils in February, clutching candles and photos, reminding the city their daughters were not statistics. Over the years, police searched the Mesa 7 more times. No new graves appeared. In 2013, the FBI offered a fresh profile of the killer, but nothing new came of it. Tips poured in, more than 1,400 total, but most led nowhere. For families, the frustration ran deeper than time. They believed their daughters' cases had been ignored because of addiction, poverty, or sex work. That stigma became another wound. In 2017, the New Mexico legislature passed a memorial urging police and media to remember the women as human beings, not as stereotypes. Then, in 2018, another discovery raised hopes. Bones turned up near the site, and families braced for the worst. Forensic testing showed they were ancient remains, unrelated to the murders. Once again, hope gave way to silence. Even with new DNA technology, there was a wall. Federal law prevented uploading profiles of deceased suspects like Montoya into CODIS. That meant science couldn't test him against what little evidence survived. In 2025, Albuquerque police and victim families supported a new bill in New Mexico to change that law. As of today, it's still waiting to pass. 15 years have passed since Christine Ross's dog pulled a bone from the desert. The West Mesa murders remain unsolved. No arrests, no charges, no convictions. Montoya is long dead. Blia sits in prison for unrelated crimes. Other names flicker in and out of the file, but none rise above suspicion. APD has kept the case active. In 2024, they renewed their $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Detectives continue to rerun DNA with improved extraction methods. And forensic genealogy is now on the table, the same tool that caught the Golden State Killer. The FBI remains a partner. Every so often, a new tip surfaces. Most fade. But investigators know it only takes one. For the families, the toll is harder. Some parents have died waiting. Others still gather at the Mesa each year, holding vigils, their voices raw. They remind anyone listening. These women mattered. They were our daughters, our sisters, our mothers. They deserve justice. And so, the desert waits. A graveyard carved into sand by someone who has never been named. A case that could be solved tomorrow if one witness speaks, one DNA test hits, one secret finally slips. In the silence of the Mesa, 11 women, and perhaps one more, still wait for their story's end. As we dig further in this intriguing, disturbing cold case, be sure to give this video a like. That way, we know you are enjoying it. Case 2. Colonial Parkway Murders, Virginia, 1986 to 1989. October 12, 1986. A jogger passing the Cheatham Annex overlook along the Colonial Parkway notices a white Honda Civic nose down an embankment. At first, it looks like a wrecked car. But when the police open it, the scene stops them cold. Inside are Kathleen Kathy Thomas, 27, and her girlfriend, Rebecca Becky Dowski, 21. Both women show restraint marks on their wrists and necks. Both suffered fatal neck injuries consistent with being choked and cut. Diesel fuel had been poured over the car, as if to set it on fire, but the match was never struck. Their purses are still there. Nothing was stolen. Whoever did this staged the scene and walked away. Less than a year later, September 1987, another vehicle appears in an isolated spot. This time, it's David Nobling's pickup truck, doors open and radio playing, left at Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge near the James River. 2 days later, his body and that of 14-year-old Robin Edwards are discovered down by the shoreline. Both had been shot. Later reports indicated Robin had been subjected to abuse before her death. Another pair, another riverside location, another double murder. By April 1988, the pattern feels undeniable. Keith Call, 20, and his date, Cassandra Cassie Haley, 18, vanish after a college party. The next morning, Keith's red Toyota Celica is found at the York River Overlook, parked neatly. Inside are his keys on the seat, his watch and glasses on the dash, and some of their clothing folded inside. But there are no bodies. Search dogs lead handlers toward the water and then lose the trail. Decades later, their remains are still missing. The last confirmed case came in September 1989. Anna Maria Phelps, 18, is traveling with her boyfriend's brother, Daniel Lauer, 21, heading toward Virginia Beach. Daniel's car is later discovered abandoned at a westbound rest stop in New Kent County. Odd, since they should have been eastbound. 6 weeks later, hunters find both of their skeletal remains in the woods less than a mile away. The exact cause of death can't be determined because of decomposition, but investigators ruled it a murder. Knife, gun, vanishing without a trace. Different methods, same type of scene. Couples isolated in cars near rivers or wooded pull-offs. Abandoned vehicles with personal items left behind. 4 pairs of young people. 8 lives ended in just 3 years. This stretch of Virginia would never see its roads the same way again. The victims weren't just names on a case file. Kathy Thomas had been one of the first women to graduate from the U.S. Naval Academy. Sharp, disciplined, and determined, she was a trailblazer. Becky Dowski was a bright William and Mary student, with her whole future ahead. David Nobling was only 20, a new father, trying to make his way as a salesman. Robin Edwards, just 14, was still in middle school, the youngest victim. Keith Call and Cassie Haley were college students at Christopher Newport, out for what should have been an ordinary date. Daniel Lauer worked in landscaping. Anna Maria Phelps dreamed of starting fresh, only to vanish along the same highways she thought would take her toward a better life. For their families, the shock was crushing. One day, normal routines. The next, a car abandoned, a body by the river, a missing child. For years, birthdays and holidays passed with empty chairs and unanswered questions. They would become linked forever, not by choice, but by the strange, cruel geography of their deaths. Because the first murders were on federal land, the FBI's Norfolk field office took lead. The next set of murders fell under Virginia State Police. Local sheriffs had pieces too. In practice, that meant 4 overlapping jurisdictions and an uneasy sharing of information. Detectives studied the cars: Kathy's Honda soaked in diesel, Keith's Toyota with items placed inside as if arranged. They asked whether the killer staged scenes to confuse them. Some investigators wondered if the victims trusted the wrong person, maybe someone flashing a badge, or someone who acted with the authority of law enforcement. But this was the 1980s. DNA testing was new, fragile, and not routine. In Kathy and Becky's case, more than 100 fingerprints were lifted from the car. None matched suspects known at the time. In David and Robin's case, water destroyed much. In Keith and Cassie's case, there were no bodies to analyze. And with Anna Maria and Daniel, decomposition erased the fine details. Dozens of suspects were pulled in and questioned. Some gave false confessions that collapsed under pressure. Ballistic tests tied Robin and David's murders to a specific gun type, but not to a suspect. Fiber and hair analysis offered hints, but never enough. By the early 1990s, the official files swelled to thousands of pages, but every path circled back to nothing solid. The Colonial Parkway cases faded from headlines, but never from the families. Year after year, they returned to the overlooks, the riversides, the rest stops, leaving flowers, holding vigils. Investigators reopened the boxes many times. Evidence was retested as DNA advanced. In later years, STR testing and even forensic genealogy were considered. FBI Norfolk gave occasional press updates. The cases remain open. We need the public's help. No one has been forgotten. Families organized too. They created networks to keep the story alive, pushing for documentaries, working with journalists, and lobbying for evidence reviews. They didn't want their children's names to be footnotes in a file drawer. Rumors swirled. Some insisted it had to be one serial killer, the Colonial Parkway killer. Others said the differences between the murders pointed to multiple offenders. For families, theories mattered less than results. They wanted accountability, any accountability, before more decades passed. For decades, nothing broke. Then in January 2024, at a joint FBI and Virginia State Police briefing, the first solid name in almost 40 years was announced: Alan W. Wilmer Sr. Wilmer had been a commercial fisherman, a waterman who worked the same rivers where 2 of the victims were found. He died in 2017, never facing charges. But preserved evidence told its own story. New DNA methods matched Wilmer to the 1987 murders of David Knobling and Robin Edwards at Ragged Island. His DNA also tied him to the 1989 killing of Teresa Howell in Hampton, not officially part of the Colonial Parkway group, but in the same region and era. If Wilmer were alive, officials said, he would have been charged. But here was the limit. Nothing currently connects Wilmer to Kathy and Becky, Keith and Cassie, or Anna Maria and Daniel. The FBI is clear. 3 of the 4 Colonial Parkway cases remain unsolved. For Knobling and Edwards, families felt bittersweet relief. Relief that the killer had a name, bitterness that death had already denied them justice in court. For the other families, the waiting goes on. What changed was not luck, but science. Evidence kept in cold storage, fingerprints, DNA swabs, fibers, finally found its match when technology advanced far beyond what 1980s labs could do. The lesson for all cold cases is clear. Preserve everything, because tomorrow's tools may see what today's cannot. Today, the Colonial Parkway still winds between trees and rivers. overlooks still sit quiet at night. Families still gather there, whispering names into the dark. One suspect has been unmasked, but 3 pairs of victims remain shadows in the files, waiting for the witness who remembers, or the fragment of DNA that can still speak. Case 3. The murder of Alistair Wilson, Nairn, Scotland, 2004. It was a Sunday evening, 28th November, 2004, just after 7 o'clock, when the calm of Crescent Road in Nairn shattered forever. The Wilson family had just settled at home. Alistair and Veronica's 2 young sons were upstairs in their pajamas. Veronica answered the doorbell to find a man on the doorstep. He was described later as around 5'7", stocky, in his 30s or 40s, wearing a baseball cap, dark jacket, and jeans. The man asked for her husband by name, Alistair Wilson. Veronica went upstairs and told Alistair someone wanted him. He came down to the door. In his hand, when he stepped back inside briefly, was a blue envelope with the word Paul written on it. He told his wife it was empty. Then, perplexed, he stepped back outside. Within moments, 3 gunshots were heard. Alistair was struck and collapsed in the doorway. Veronica found him unresponsive, only steps away from their children. He was rushed to Regmore Hospital in Inverness, but doctors were unable to save him. Scotland had just witnessed one of its most baffling and intimate killings. A man targeted at his own front door, with his wife and children inside, by a gunman who vanished into the night. 10 days later, the firearm used in the attack surfaced. A council worker clearing drains on Seabank Road, less than a mile from the Wilson home, discovered a small pocket pistol. Tests confirmed it was the weapon, a Henel-Sul pocket pistol, .25 caliber, manufactured in Germany in the 1920s or 1930s. The ammunition was Cellier and Bellet, made in the 1980s or 1990s, decades newer than the gun. There were no usable fingerprints or DNA on the weapon. A relic of another era had been used to kill a young father in a quiet seaside town. And the envelope? It vanished. The police never recovered it. Its meaning, whether code, misdirection, or personal taunt, remains unknown. Alistair Wilson was not a man who seemed destined for violent headlines. He was 30 years old, a business manager at the local Bank of Scotland, a husband and a father of 2 boys aged 2 and 4. He and Veronica had recently moved into the ground floor flat of a house on Crescent Road, with Veronica's father in the upstairs flat above. By every account, he was ordinary, commuting on foot, balancing work and family life, helping raise young children in a town where crime of this nature was almost unheard of. Friends described him as responsible and reserved. His role at the bank was demanding but local, tied to loans and customers in the community. Neighbors remembered a family that blended easily into the rhythm of Nairn. To them, the idea that someone would ask for him by name and then end his life at his doorstep seemed impossible. That impossibility became the town's obsession, then the nation's mystery. The Police Scotland inquiry that followed was one of the largest ever launched in the Highlands. Dozens of officers were deployed. Theories multiplied quickly. The most immediate focus was the gunman. Witnesses described him as stocky, short to medium build, baseball cap pulled low. Despite house-to-house inquiries and appeals, no composite sketch ever led to a named suspect. Detectives believed he may have been local or had local knowledge because he disappeared into Nairn within minutes, on foot or in a waiting vehicle. The gun offered investigators one of the strangest clues. The Henel-Sul pocket pistol was rare in the UK. Fewer than a dozen had ever been recovered in Scotland. Forensic work revealed Cellier and Bellat ammunition from the late 20th century. This combination suggested the weapon had been kept for decades, perhaps as a collectible, and paired with much newer bullets. Police later confirmed that lines of inquiry included tracing other Henel-Sul pistols known in Britain. None produced a match to a suspect. Then there was the envelope marked Paul. Alistair showed it to Veronica before he was shot, saying it was empty. Its disappearance remains a central puzzle. Police confirmed it was never recovered. Theories have ranged from mistaken identity, that the killer expected a Paul at that address, to the envelope being a ruse to get Alistair to the door, but no evidence has surfaced to explain it. Detectives explored Alistair's work at the bank, considering whether loans, foreclosures, or disputes had created enemies. For years, this was a dominant theory. Later reviews, however, downplayed the likelihood of a professional or financial motive, pointing instead to his personal life and immediate environment. One focus was a dispute about a decking area outside the Havelock Hotel, directly across from the Wilsons' home. Alistair had raised objections to it, voicing concerns about planning permission. Police would later call this dispute significant. They even traveled to Canada to interview a witness connected to the matter. It became a major line of inquiry, but never led to charges. Years passed without an arrest. Each November brought appeals and anniversaries. Alistair's sons grew up without their father, the crime hovering like a shadow over their family. In 2017, the BBC revisited the case, drawing attention back to the envelope and the rare pistol. In 2020, Police Scotland confirmed publicly that the gun was a Haenel Sewell pocket pistol, hoping a collector or witness might recall its history. In 2022, they declared the decking dispute significant and emphasized that the answer likely lay in Alistair's personal life, not his banking work. They also suggested that two people may have been involved, one to engage, one to fire. Throughout, the family appealed for answers. In 2024, on the 20th anniversary, they criticized Police Scotland, saying they felt let down and mistrustful of how the case had been handled. For Veronica and her sons, every passing year was another without justice, another reminder that the gunman still had no name. 2 decades after the killing, Police Scotland launched Operation Sabine, a full reinvestigation. In September 2024, the Lord Advocate ordered prosecutors and detectives to work together. A new team of specialists in major crime and intelligence took charge. In November 2024, Police Scotland opened a major investigation public portal, inviting anyone with information to submit tips digitally, anonymously, if necessary. It was a bid to reach people who had stayed silent for 20 years. Detectives restated what they needed: information about the weekend before the murder, especially at the Havelock Hotel, sightings of a man in a baseball cap on Crescent Road that Sunday night, and any knowledge of the Haenel Sewell pistol or its movements before it ended up in a drain. They also repeated what they believed. The answer was close to home, in Alistair's community, not in corporate banking. Yet, as of now, the case is still unsolved. The man at the door remains nameless. The envelope marked Paul has never been found. The pistol gave police a weapon, but no killer. Forensic science has advanced. DNA extraction techniques are sharper. Forensic genealogy has broken other cold cases, and digital records can map movements unthinkable in 2004. Operation Sabine holds out hope that one overlooked detail, a witness memory, a fragment of trace, a new scientific method, could finally close the gap. But for the Wilson family, the reality is harsh. They lived through 20 years of appeals, theories, and speculation without an arrest. For their children, the only story of their father's final moments is the one the world knows: a stranger at the door, an envelope that made no sense, and gunfire that ended a life. Case 4. Hammersmith Nude Murders, London, UK, 1964-65. On the morning of the 2nd of February 1964, a chilling discovery on the Thames foreshore beneath Linden House, near Hammersmith Bridge. A woman's body, without clothing, fabric placed in her mouth, several missing teeth, and evidence of neck compression. Identified later as Hannah Tailford, this became the first recognized death in a serial pattern that would drain London's west side of peace. Weeks later, 8th April 1964, another victim surfaced: Irene Lockwood, found on the foreshore at Corney Reach, Chiswick. She was pregnant at her death. Again, neck compression, no clothing, no clear wounds distinguishing other than compression markings consistent with binding. In April 1964, Helen Barthélemy, 22 years old, was discovered in a narrow alley off Boston Manor Road, Brentford. She too showed signs of neck compression and was without clothing. The key forensic clue: flecks of industrial paint on her body. Investigators deduced that paint likely came from a motor vehicle paint shop or industrial workshop. putting the killer's workplace in the frame. A few months later, 14 July 1964, Mary Fleming, 30, was left outside 48 Berrymead Road, Chiswick. Neighbors recalled a car reversing just before the body was found. Paint spots again appeared. Her dentures were missing. Then came Frances Brown, also known as Margaret McGowan, last seen 23 October 1964, and discovered 25 November 1964 in a Kensington car park. She showed evidence consistent with neck compression. A client last seen getting into her car provided an identikit and described her leaving in a gray Ford Zephyr or Zodiac. Finally, on the 16th of February 1965, behind the Heron Trading Estate, Acton, was Bridget Bridie O'Hara. Her remains were found near a storage shed. She bore paint flecks matched to a transformer next to the estate, and evidence suggested her body had been kept in a warm environment before it was left there. These bodies were discovered on roadsides, riverbanks, industrial estates, alleys, none in remote wilderness, but in places where night's anonymity meets urban margins. The killer left them without clothing, restrained some, and used neck compression, and often moved them to places that balanced visibility to ensure discovery and concealment to buy time. These 6 women were not abstractions. They were real people, many from vulnerable walks of life. They were sex workers, often struggling for income in a city that offered them few protections. The public sometimes reduced them to the Hammersmith nudes, but each had a name, a family, a story. Hannah Tailford, 30, found in February 1964, her body showing definitive signs of violence and staging. Irene Lockwood, 25 to 26, pregnant at death, discovered in April 1964 at Corny Reach. Helen Barthélemy, 22, whose case brought paint flecks into play. Mary Fleming, 30, body discovered in July 1964, dentures missing, car reversing heard. Frances Brown / Margaret McGowan, 21, found November 1964, tied to the Stephen Ward trial earlier. An identikit and vehicle narrative emerged. Bridget Bridie O'Hara, 27 to 28, discovered February 1965 with paint evidence and signs of warm keeping before being left. Some theories extend the series to Elizabeth Figg, 1959, and Gwyneth Reese, 1963, found also without clothing or partially so near the Thames or dump sites. Whether they belong to the same killer remains uncertain. These women were not identical, but they shared marginalization, exposure to risk, minimal protection. The killer selected among those whose silent society often tolerated. Their names deserve to rise above nude and stripper. Chief Superintendent John Dew Rose of Scotland Yard took charge of the inquiry, assembling one of the largest manhunts of its era. Reports state he interviewed nearly 7,000 suspects. The single most promising forensic thread was the paint flecks found on 4 victims. Investigators matched them to paint from a transformer behind the Heron Trading Estate, adjacent to a paint-spraying business, suggesting that the killer worked at or had access to that estate. DuRose staged a series of public announcements intended to flush the killer. He declared the suspect pool had shrunk successively, from 20 to 10 to 3 men, effectively forcing scrutiny, maybe panic. After those announcements, the killing stopped. Some see that as coincidence, others as tactic. One prominent hollow lead. On 27 April 1964, Kenneth Archibald, 57-year-old caretaker at a tennis club, walked into a police station and confessed to Irene Lockwood's death. But he retracted and, in court, was acquitted. There was no evidence linking him to other crimes in the series. That confession and retreat consumed weeks of resources. Throughout, the investigation's breadth was enormous. Factories, garages, vehicle records, paint suppliers, electricians, local criminals, and associates of known organized crime. But the tools of the 1960s, basic fingerprint work, rudimentary trace, limited victim tracking, could not bridge gap after gap. The flood of tips and suspects overwhelmed detectives, many of whom privately later wondered whether the killer was someone already in the system, unnoticed. After 1965, the official hunt slowly receded. The term Jack the Stripper became a media brand, invoking Jack the Ripper, yet twisting the narrative to silence the victims. Press attention lapsed, evidence stored, mislabeled, and, according to multiple sources, lost or destroyed. Investigators later acknowledged that forensic materials from the era were not preserved to modern standards. Some vital exhibits, slides, microscopic samples, and files are missing or degraded. This loss arguably ensured that any later re-examination by modern DNA would face barriers. In 1970, Rose publicly expressed that his favored suspect was a man he nicknamed Big John, later identified as Mungo Ireland, a Scottish security guard who worked at the Heron estate. After O'Hara's discovery, Ireland was found deceased in his garage. Authorities recorded carbon monoxide poisoning, and records indicate the death was self-inflicted. He left a note. "I can't stick it any longer." Some saw it as guilt, others as despair. But investigations later identified an alibi placing Ireland in Scotland at the time of O'Hara's death. Some sources argue the police had access to conflicting records and that the alibi may have been misfiled or falsified. Despite renewed scrutiny, no legal charges followed. Over the decades, speculation widened. In 2019, criminologists revisited Harold Jones, a Welsh murderer from 1921, pointing out that he later lived in London and worked in panel beating, giving him access to industrial paint similar to the flecks found on victims. But there is no police confirmation of Jones's involvement. Others floated names. Freddie Mills, the boxing champion who died from a firearm-related injury in 1965, had been rumored by gangland circles to be implicated, alleged by some authors to have confessed, but official investigation dismissed him entirely as a suspect. One theory, advanced by authors, held that a Metropolitan Police detective was suspected by colleagues but never publicly charged. Another theory suggests Tommy Butler, a former superintendent in the Metropolitan Police's flying squad, was posthumously accused by whistleblowers. Neither theory gained prosecutorial traction. In short, the murders became a legend, the victims' shadows, the files' ghosts. The city moved on, the case did not. As of now, there is no confirmed breakthrough. The case remains officially unsolved. No one has ever been convicted for the Hammersmith nude murders. Just before we continue, thank you for being here and supporting this channel. It means more than you know, especially when it comes to shining a light on these cold cases. This community is growing because of you. By becoming a YouTube member, you'll get special perks, extra content, and help us keep telling the stories of those who still need justice. Your support makes all the difference in bringing these cases into the spotlight. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. It's incredible to see how people from all over the world are connecting to these stories and helping us keep the search for answers alive. Case 5. The Murder of Lindsay Buziak, Saanich, British Columbia, Canada, 2008. Saturday, February 2nd, 2008. 1702 De Sousa Place, a vacant home at the dead end of a cul-de-sac in Saanich, near Torquay Drive. The home sat at the intersection of De Sousa and Torquay. Its rear garden backed onto Torquay, and the fence ran parallel to the street. At about 5:30 p.m., Lindsay Buziak arrived for what she believed would be a routine home showing. She was greeted by a man and woman she had never met, both dressed neatly. Witnesses later described the man as 6 feet tall, dark hair, and the woman as blonde, aged 35 to 45, wearing a distinctive patterned dress. They walked up the cul-de-sac together and greeted Lindsay. She shook their hands, but her body would be discovered only minutes later. Shortly after entering the house, Lindsay was attacked in the upstairs master bedroom. She sustained multiple sharp force injuries. Her BlackBerry phone dialed out accidentally around 5:41 p.m., likely a pocket dial triggered during the assault. That timestamp became the forensic anchor for the moment of her death. The coroner's report placed that call as one of the last electronic movements from her device before silence. At approximately 5:40 p.m., just as Jason Zalo and his colleague arrived in the cul-de-sac, Lindsay lay unresponsive upstairs. Jason, later interviewed, recalled seeing movement through the front door's glazing. He parked his car, waited, then moved around to the back, found a patio door open and eventually entered the home. Inside, he discovered Lindsay and immediately called 911. Paramedics arrived but could not revive her. The official cause of death was severe blood loss from multiple sharp force injuries. There were no defensive injuries documented, no evidence of sexual violence, and nothing was stolen. The attack was swift, highly targeted, and merciless. Inside the house, forensic teams found no usable fingerprints, no identifiable DNA, no weapon, and no apparent forced entry. The killers vanished, leaving a meticulously staged scene and a void of forensic trace. Investigators later confirmed the prepaid phone used to contact Lindsay was purchased in Vancouver months earlier, activated in late January 2008, and carried across to Vancouver Island by ferry before being used only for that contact chain. That setup underscored planning, not chance. All the vehicles in D'Souza Place were accounted for. No getaway car was observed in the cul-de-sac. Witnesses saw the couple approaching on foot. The rear exit route, through the back garden, fence line, and toward Torquay, was the most plausible path to a vehicle outside view. The killers appeared to have walked in, carried out the attack quickly, and walked out through the back, leaving no direct footprint or traceable physical evidence. Lindsay Elizabeth Buziak, born November 2, 1983, was 24 years old that day. Her parents, Jeff and Evelyn, and her sister Sarah, remembered a woman who was encouraging, ambitious, and committed to making her mark in real estate. She had landed a position with Ray/Max and was taking on clients with high expectations. She was engaged to Jason Zalo, a real estate colleague from a prominent local family, and had confided in her father and Jason about the odd client who first expressed interest, one with a foreign-sounding accent and a budget of $1 million. That call unnerved her. She texted and asked for verification, but the lure of the commission pushed her forward. Jason offered to wait outside during the showing to protect her. Lindsay tried to check the legitimacy of the client. She asked how they got her personal number. The client claimed a prior client had shared it. She told Jason. He encouraged her to go ahead, offering a safety buffer. She left believing she was meeting buyers. No one knew she was walking into a trap. Her personality, work ethic, and loving relationships made her loss all the more devastating for her community and her family. Saanich police quickly took control. They reconstructed phone and call records. They confirmed the prepaid phone was registered under a false name, Paulo Rodriguez, used only to contact Lindsay just days before the killing, and then deactivated. Cell tower pings placed it crossing by ferry from Vancouver the day before. These facts pointed to planning and coordination. Jason Zalo and his colleague, who accompanied him that day, were interviewed thoroughly. They were detained, then released. Police verified their movements via CCTV footage from an auto shop at 5:30 p.m., confirming they left at that time and did not commit the attack. Jason has been interviewed repeatedly through the years, has cooperated, and has passed polygraph tests. Saanich police have publicly stated he is not a suspect. In February 2009, nearly a year after Lindsay's death, the Saanich police released a composite sketch of the female suspect. She was described as a short-haired blonde, aged 35 to 45, wearing a dress with thick white and red swirl patterns. The man was described as 6 feet tall, dark hair, dressed in a light to medium jacket. Investigators hoped the images would jog memories. Detectives explored multiple theories: that the killing was a planned contract-style attack, possibly tied to drug networks or professional crime. But they later rejected those theories, saying such operations typically leave different forensic traces. Instead, current belief narrowed toward a personal motive, someone within her circle or familiar with her work. Leads examined included her real estate contacts, prior clients, and unusual activity among her Facebook friends, flagged in police files. Many persons were ruled out. None remain publicly confirmed suspects. The forensic void pushed the case into lab-cold territory. The Saanich police expressed in later statements that new forensic and genealogy techniques might unlock what traditional analysis could not. In 2021, they confirmed the case was being reinvestigated with assistance from the FBI and RCMP, applying modern DNA retesting to preserved evidence. No public breakthroughs have emerged. With each anniversary, public pressure has grown. Jeff Buziak, Lindsay's father, became her public voice. He organized the annual Lindsay Buziak Walk for Justice, gave interviews, and pressed police to share updates. He has been openly critical of investigative delays and the handling of evidence. Media coverage amplified the case. Dateline NBC Investigation Discovery, Canadian national coverage, and podcasts revisited the story. Some narratives contained errors or speculative leaps. Police urged the public to focus on confirmed leads. Capital Daily, in 2020, secured unsealed documents revealing 2 phone devices, one for contact, one for checking voicemail, and unusual internet activity tied to Lindsay in the days before her death. That reporting added context, but no named suspect. Rumors flared. An anonymous message posted in 2017 on a message board claimed, "I killed and stupid cops will never prove it." The message was not verified. Police treated it as a hoax, but the cruelty underscored how the case became burdened by noise. Investigators repeatedly said they believe people with knowledge still live in the community. They have appealed yearly for witnesses, or anyone with even small memories. Cars parked, footsteps heard, phone patterns noticed. The case remains active and under review. To date, 16 years later, no one has been arrested. No public names have been confirmed. Saanich police continue to call the case active, with full-time detectives assigned. The FBI and RCMP continue to lend forensic and investigative support. Modern methods, such as forensic genealogy and retesting preserved evidence, remain hopeful avenues. But because the crime left no usable DNA, no prints, no weapon, the key may lie in human memory rather than lab breakthroughs. The suppressed envelope of motive, the voice behind that first phone call, a passing car, a name that emerges on social media, any of these might still reopen the door. The house at 1702 remains a tragic monument, a home showing turned into an ambush. The front door greeted her. The upstairs room became the place where her life ended. For 16 years, the collateral of that meeting has been absent. Case 6. Cindy James, Richmond, Canada, 1989. June 8, 1989, a city worker cuts across the backyard of an abandoned house on Blundell Road and stops cold. A woman lies in the grass, bound with her hands and feet pulled behind her back. A black nylon stocking is tied around her neck. On the fuel tank, someone has sprayed a slur stating that a woman died there in orange paint. An orange line on the ground runs from that tank to her body and circles it, like a crude map of death. The name comes later. The first facts are these. Cindy James is 44, missing for nearly 2 weeks, and now she is found on the edge of a busy street where people pass every day. The details pile up fast. Her right leg is tangled under blackberry bramble. A coat lies near her. At the scene, a pathologist observes that her hands are tied so tightly one finger has scratched another to the bone, and there's a pinprick in the crook of her right arm that looks like a possible injection site. Later, a forensic entomologist will look at insect activity and estimate she died as early as June 2nd, days before her body was spotted. This was not a quiet, drug-related death behind closed doors. This was staged in the open, then left for someone to find. Now the toxicology: morphine, diazepam, Valium, and flurazepam, a lethal mix. The lab reports about 10 times the lethal dose of morphine in her blood. Her stomach contents show a heavy oral intake of diazepam and flurazepam, each enough to kill on their own. But how the morphine got in cannot be nailed down. The pharmacologist is blunt. The route of administration is undetermined. The official cause is combined drug intoxication. The manner will not be called suicide, homicide, or accident. The coroner chooses 2 words that still split people in half: unknown event. 2 weeks earlier, on May 25th, her car turned up at the Blundell Center lot. There was blood on the driver's door. Groceries and a wrapped birthday present sat inside. Items from her wallet were found under the car. Her house was tidy and undisturbed. That day she had picked up her paycheck, run errands, and failed to make it home to meet friends who were due over. From the plaza to the yard where she was found is a short drive. The gap between those places is the heart of the case. Before that yard, Cindy James had been telling police for almost 7 years that someone wanted her dead. She worked as a nurse and had also done family counseling. Friends said she was kind, capable, and, by the end, frayed by fear. The call started in 1982. Voices shifting tone, obscene whispers, threats. Lights loosened, windows cut, lines slashed. She moved homes, changed numbers, kept logs, and asked for help. The RCMP opened files and kept opening them. By the late 1980s, they had responded to roughly 90 reports and spent an estimated $1 to $1.5 million chasing a stalker they could never find. Some episodes are almost unbelievable. In January 1984, a private investigator heard odd radio chatter, went to her place, and found her unconscious on the floor with a paring knife driven through her hand. Pinned under the blade was a note cut from magazines. "Now you must die." Doctors noted a needle mark in her arm, but detected no drugs in her system. In December 1985, she was discovered partially unclothed in a ditch, hypothermic, with a nylon stocking around her neck. She had no memory of getting there. Fires were set. Threat letters arrived. Pets were harmed. She told her family she was being hunted. Cindy kept trying to live a life between alarms. She worked at Richmond General Hospital, saw friends, and tried to date. Fear sat beside her at dinner. By spring 1989, fresh notes appeared. "Soon, Cindy," and someone scrawled "Sleep well" on her windshield. She asked for security upgrades at home. 20 days later, she vanished. 2 weeks after that, she was found. The police started where they could: the car, the yard, the calendar. They logged the blood, the groceries, the gift, the wallet contents, and they tried to trace Cindy's last hours on May 25th. The Coast Guard searched local waterways. A tenant told investigators a man phoned his office pretending to be Cindy's father and asked about her life insurance. When police questioned the real father, he denied making the call. The memorial service that June was discreetly filmed. Plates and faces were recorded just in case. That abandoned house on Blundell was demolished later that summer. Then came the autopsy package and the courtroom fight. The toxicology was heavy and clear: morphine, diazepam, flurazepam, but the mechanics were messy. The benzodiazepines were swallowed in lethal amounts. The morphine remained a question mark. A needle mark on the right arm looked like injection, but no one could prove how the morphine entered her system. Defense and doubt grew side by side. Police looked backward as well as forward. Through the years, they had set up surveillance, tried phone traps, used scent-tracking dogs, and followed leads into alleys that went nowhere. By 1990, the RCMP were saying publicly what they had been thinking privately, that they couldn't corroborate a real-world stalker. They pointed to Cindy's history of depression and prior thoughts of ending her own life, and suggested that at least some incidents were staged, maybe by Cindy herself. Her family rejected that as victim blaming. They pointed to the stalking ligature that kept repeating across years, and to assaults that left visible marks. The case moved into an inquest with both sides dug in. The inquest became its own kind of trial: 5 jurors, over 80 witnesses, and a schedule that grew to about 40 days, the longest and most expensive in British Columbia at the time. Among the displays was a not expert who showed how the bindings found on Cindy could be self-applied in under 3 minutes. Just enough time, perhaps, before the sedatives fully took hold. That did not prove she tied them herself. It proved that it was possible. Years rolled on without a charge. Writers and producers took turns trying to resolve what the inquest could not. 2 books came out in 1991, one arguing murder, one leaning toward staged events. Unsolved Mysteries aired her story. A new generation rediscovered it online. Each retelling wrestled the same contradictions: bindings and neck ligature that look like a killing, tox screens that suggest planning, graffiti that could be theater, and a public record where a major police force says it found no attacker. Inside that noise, a few anchors hold. Cindy disappeared May 25th, with errands half done. Her car in the plaza had blood, groceries, a wrapped gift, and wallet items under the chassis. She lay for days behind a house on Blundell Road, with bindings and a stocking around her neck. The toxicology is not in dispute. Morphine, diazepam, flurazepam, enough to kill her more than once. The manner is the part no one can agree to write down. The jury chose unknown event. That phrase has outlived everyone's press conference. Families and experts split into two camps. One side says Cindy was the target of a cruel stalker who escalated for years and finally killed her, staging the scene to confuse police. They cite the earlier assaults, cut lines, and knife-pinned threat note as the through line. The other side says the lack of offender evidence after a $1 million investigation, the repeat presence of a stalking and incidents when she was alone, and the not demo point to a self-orchestrated death rooted in mental illness and trauma. Both stories can fit parts of the record. Neither can fill all of it. That is the problem. Today, there is no breakthrough to report. No arrest, no named suspect, no new verdict. The official label stays unknown event. The RCMP's conclusion in practice was that they couldn't prove an external offender. Cindy's family continues to insist that someone out there got away with murder. Those positions have not moved in decades. What we do know, without spin, is enough to keep anyone awake. A woman with a long documented history of frightening incidents left a shopping plaza and did not make it home. Her car showed blood and abandoned errands. Her body was later found bound, sedated, and with a ligature around the neck under open sky. The drugs in her system were powerful and specific. At least 2 were swallowed. The morphine was there in lethal force, and no one can say how it got in. A not demo proved possibility, not authorship. The graffiti was either a cruel flourish by a killer or a piece of stagecraft no one can fully explain. The verdict the jury reached may be the only honest one left. We don't know. If Cindy was killed by another person, that offender knew how to control time and space, to drug, bind, and stage, and to disappear without a clean trail. If she engineered the scene herself, then we are still left with a tragedy, one that grew from fear and illness and ended in a place meant to shock whoever found her. Either way, a life ended in a yard, and the fight about what it means has outlived the person at its center. Case 7. Maria James, Thornbury, Melbourne, Australia, 1980. Just after midday, Tuesday, June 17, 1980, a call from the back of a Thornbury bookshop sets the day spinning. Maria James is on the line with her ex-husband John at Fitzroy Town Hall. But it hadn't started there. Earlier, John had been out of the office when Maria first rang. His secretary, Isabella Fabris, picked up. Normally, Maria was cheerful, happy to talk, but this time she was short, hurried. Isabella took a message for John to return her call. When John got back and phoned Maria, she wasn't alone. She asked him to hold the line, saying she had someone in the kitchen. As he waited, he thought he heard voices, an argument, then a startled yelp. The call grew strange, one-sided, as if Maria was being spoken at rather than speaking. Then silence. Several minutes of it. Uneasy, John began whistling into the phone, trying to get her back. Nothing. Finally, he told Isabella that something was wrong and that he was driving to the bookshop straight away. It took him about 15 minutes to reach High Street. When he arrived, just after midday, the shop was locked. He ran to the back laneway, tried the door, locked again. He hammered on it, but there was no reply. He looped back and forth, front to back, panic mounting, until desperation drove him to force entry. He climbed through a side window into the dark house. Inside, there was silence. He moved into the kitchen, called out. No response. Gripped with dread, he took a small green-handled knife from the drawer and began inching through the rooms. The lounge, empty. The boys' room, empty. Then into Maria's bedroom. He flicked the light on and froze. Maria lay on the floor, eyes open, covered in stabbing injuries, her body dragged across the carpet. Her hands were bound, likely after death. The attack was frenzied, and police would later describe it as bizarre. Whoever had done this had probably left the house soaked in blood, and almost certainly had been known to her. What John never saw that day may be the most haunting detail. According to the original police reconstruction, the killer was hiding behind the bedroom door as John stood there, close enough to touch, yet unseen. In shock, John bolted from the house and ran to a nearby phone to alert police. He paced up and down the laneway, then circled back to the shop. This time, the front door that had been locked minutes earlier now stood open. Inside, a woman browsed the shelves, unaware of what lay beyond. She told John the door was already open when she came in. Back in the kitchen, 2 coffee cups sat on the counter, evidence that Maria had let someone in willingly. John was certain the voice he heard on the phone was familiar to her. Detectives agreed. Whoever committed the crime had likely been invited inside. Before the headlines, Maria was simply a mom of 2 who ran a second-hand bookshop with a small home at the back. Mark was 13, Adam 11. She and John were separated but close, united in raising their boys. That morning, she made breakfast, saw them off to school, and kept the shop running. By lunchtime, everything had changed. Her sons would later reveal something that shifted the focus forever. In the weeks before her death, Adam disclosed that he had been abused by a local Catholic priest. Maria planned to confront it. That single fact shifts motive from strangers to proximity. One who held power, who had reason to silence a mother, and who felt exposed by what she knew. The response looks different from modern playbooks. Detectives set up their base inside Maria's home, walking past the blood-stained bedroom carpet every day to a makeshift office. A police caravan parks out front so locals can drop in tips. Officers push photo fits to taxi drivers and take statements from shopkeepers up and down High Street. They try everything, including a hypnosis-derived sketch from a garbage collector, a first for Victoria Police then, and long since abandoned. Leads arrive in stacks. Early persons of interest come from her daily life. A real estate agent 2 doors down, someone Maria had dated until she found out he was married, offers an alibi. It checks. A local loaner who tried to sell explicit magazines shows a dry cleaning receipt for removing a blood-like stain. Binding twine is found in his yard. He is later ruled out by testing. A telecom worker questioned by detectives died by self-inflicted causes days later, and that line never firms into evidence. None of it breaks the case. Still, there was a name that kept appearing again and again. Who? Father Anthony Bongiorno. But why? First because of parish ties, later because of specific sightings and behavior. A witness later tells investigators he saw a priest with fresh blood on both hands near the area that day. Years after, that testimony is aired and then tested in court. Detectives also look at Father Thomas O'Keefe, linked to abuse allegations involving Adam. Veteran homicide detective Ron Iddles will eventually tell a coroner he believes Bongiorno had motive, means, and opportunity. Even so, the file doesn't produce clean forensic proof tying any priest to the bedroom. For one thing, forensics in 1980 could only go so far. Basic serology, latent prints, careful photography. Years later, a supposed linchpin, the DNA profile from a blood-stained pillowcase, falls apart. In 2017, after the ABC's Trace podcast re-examines the case, Victoria Police admitted the pillowcase was from an unrelated crime scene. It had wrongly ruled out suspects, including Bongiorno, for years. The department calls it human error. Investigators now have to unpick decisions built on a false exhibit, and that wasn't the only setback. At the 2021 inquest, counsel assisting tells the court there were 5 major exhibit errors, including missing clothing and a lost bed quilt. One bungle, the court hears, cost 14 years of potential progress. When a cold case relies on trace, losing faith in exhibits is like losing the map. Still, the core facts of the scene never change. 2 cups, bound hands likely post-mortem, drag marks, a front door that seemed to lock and then unlock, and witnesses who saw a man run. The picture points to someone Maria knew, who felt safe enough to step into her kitchen and bold enough to leave her boys without a mother. Attention ebbs. The family refuses to let the case fade. In 2017, the ABC's Trace podcast, led by journalist Rachel Brown, puts the story back on front pages. The series surfaces witnesses, pressures agencies, and exposes the pillowcase mix-up that warped the file. The public leans in. The coroner listens. A fresh inquest is approved, something many families never get. Hearings start in September 2021. The court hears how exhibit mismanagement stalled the case, and it takes new statements about Buongiorno and about Peter Keogh, a violent offender later convicted over the 1987 killing of Vicky Cleary. A former top detective, Ron Iddles, tells the court he still leans toward Buongiorno. Other witnesses argue Keogh deserved a harder look. The point isn't that one theory wins, it's that the public record finally shows how much was missed, mishandled, or left untested. The verdict came on March 31st, 2022. Deputy State Coroner Caitlin English returned an open finding. She does not name a killer, but she does state that two deceased men, Father Anthony Buongiorno and Peter Keogh, should remain significant persons of interest. For the family, it's not closure, it's an honest frame for what still needs to be done. Then, another turn. On June 14th, 2024, Victoria Police announces a $1 million reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. They restate what they can prove. Maria called John just before noon. Someone was with her. Both doors were locked when he arrived. The front door was open minutes later. Her hands were bound. She suffered extensive stabbing injuries, and two witnesses saw a man running soon after she was found. The reward says what investigators have believed for 4 decades. Someone out there knows the missing piece. Through all of it, Mark and Adam stand in front of microphones and repeat the same plea. They were 13 and 11 when their mom was killed. They're men now, but still the boys who lived behind the shop. Mark, now 50, has spent his adult life searching for answers to his mother's murder. Adam, 48, has cerebral palsy and Tourette syndrome, and Mark has cared for him since their father passed away in 1996, just like he promised his mom he would. Adam has great difficulty communicating, so it's Mark who does most of the talking. Mark remembers the day he was told of his mother's death as if it happened yesterday. He was collected from school by a parish priest who broke the news to him. I could barely stand up after he said it. He had to half drag me into the principal's office, Mark recalls. It was almost like my life stopped and everything just stopped dead. Mark and Adam continue to ask for the same thing. Facts, not rumors. Names, not whispers. One person to step forward with the piece of information that will finally bring justice. So where does that leave the story? With a bedroom that still speaks, a kitchen with 2 cups that still matter, and a street that still holds a running man no one has named. With a file rebuilt after exhibit errors and a DNA bungle that warped priorities. With 2 deceased persons of interest and no indictment. And with a family that has given most of a lifetime to a single question: who walked into their mother's home and did not walk out the same? Each story reminds us that behind every headline are families who never stop asking why, and communities that still carry the weight of unanswered questions. Their voices ask for attention, not sympathy. For answers, not excuses. The past cannot be undone, but the future can still hold justice if light keeps shining on what was hidden. If these stories moved you, share them, talk about them, and keep the questions alive. Subscribe for more cases that deserve to be remembered, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Justice may take years, but remembering is the first step toward finding it.